I'll call this meeting of the Planning and Zoning Board to order on April 20th, 21st, 2026. If we could all stand and join each other for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay, good evening. This is roll call. Member Sutton. Vice Chair Elliott. Chair Brown.
Present.
Member Kulikowski.
Present.
Member Ross is absent. We have a quorum.
Okay, it's a public forum. Is there anyone present who would like to speak? Hearing no one, seeing no one, we will close the floor. Has everybody had a chance to review the meeting minutes from October 21st of 2025? Does everybody approve of the minutes?
Yes. A second.
Okay, motion is approved. Oh, sorry. All who agree, say aye. Aye. All right, it's approved. All right. New business. Today we've got the Turnpike Commerce Park at 16360 West Colonial Drive design review.
Good evening, members of the Good evening, members of the Planning and Zoning Board. I know I might be a new face for some of you, so I'll just introduce myself. I'm Taylor Haig. I'm the newest member of the planning team over at Wade Trim, the contracted town planners for the town of Oakland, and I'm happy to present this case to you tonight. Going over the property first, the property is a approximately 13.8 acre parcel that is both zoned and contains a future land use classification of industrial. It is located within the town's urban corridor design district, and the purpose and intent of tonight's case is to review the proposed Turnpike Commerce Park Industrial Flex Space project. Next slide, please. So here's a site location map. The actual site is an amalgamation of several different parcels, all come together to form the shape you see there outlined in red. Next slide, please. So just going into a little bit of background on the site, there was a previous project approved in 2021 for a self-storage facility. That original proposal did contain 9 different buildings, totaling approximately 164,000 square feet. It should be noted that the proposal tonight, the Turnpike Commerce Park, is completely separate and would replace the previous approval that was granted to this property. Slide, please. So looking at what the scope of the proposal is 4 single-story industrial flex space buildings. Each one of those buildings is proposed to be 40,040 square feet for a total of 160,160 total square feet. Nice round number. And the buildings are proposed to be oriented north-south with the end caps facing West Colonial Drive and the Florida Turnpike. The access to this property would be that narrow parcel of land that connects directly to West Colonial Drive, if you remember from the aerial imagery. And as part of this proposal, that portion of the property would be dedicated to the town as right-of-way. So here's a visual concept of that. You see the 4 buildings and that access point directly north out to State Road 50. And here are the elevations. So the elevations are actually going to be broken down into 2 different pages. So starting off, these are the proposed renderings from the portions of the buildings that would be visible from public rights of way. Next slide. And here you'll notice these would be the ones that don't have that visibility. And you'll notice the main difference, if we can go back 1 slide, you'll notice on that top right image, the addition of a second quote unquote story of windows, even though these are all 1-story buildings. And then you compare that, next slide, please. And there you can see the main difference between the two different. Next slide, please. And here's a more conceptual 3D rendering of the proposal. These are of those buildings that do have that additional fenestration window space along that facade or that faux second story. And here's another more close-up angle of that building. Here's a proposed floor plan. You can see the individual bays and tenant spaces that would be occupied, and these are, you can multiply this by 4. It is mirrored over the 4 buildings that are proposed for the site. And now we'll go into the variances. So before coming to you, the Appearance Review Board in its capacity did have the ability to make recommendations on dimensional variances to the town's design district requirements. They can make special exceptions or, like I said, variances. The purpose was to review the proposals to ensure that even with these variances, the overall intent and purpose of the design districts are still maintained through the proposal. The requested lists of variances were proposed to the Appearance Review Board on their March 3rd meeting. So going over the actual variances themselves, I'll briefly touch on them here, but the applicant group also has their own presentation that'll go over these in a little bit more detail. We're just running through these quickly. First and foremost, for landscape buffering, the code general standards does require a property such as this that directly abuts a single family zoned property to install a landscape buffer in addition to a wall. As part of their request, they did request to forego the landscape wall due to the proximity of the buildings from that property line. And because only such a narrow portion of that property line would be required to place a wall, it created an oddity along that eastern property line. The minimum parking requirement, looking at the general standards of the town's land development code, if you factor in the square footage and number of employees for industrial space, this proposal would need about 1,600 parking spaces. As part of their request, they did instead elect to utilize the ITE standard for industrial flex space, which is the industry standard for this type of use. It factors in a number of different studies, peak hour trips, expected weekend trips, and creates an acceptable range of required parking spaces per use type. And that is how we go from 1,638 spaces to the 216 proposed based on the standard. In terms of the industrial building floor plate, or you can think of the footprint of the building itself, the code standard only permits 32,000 as a maximum for industrial building types. As part of the proposal, as I mentioned, 40,040 is what they're requesting per building. And in terms of building orientation, the general standard of the code is to require the primary facades of all buildings to face public rights of way. As we mentioned, the buildings in their orientation are proposed to face north-south with the end caps facing the rights of way. And lastly, the standard is 30% building fenestration, and this means the total percentage of openings, whether that be doors, windows, has to be a minimum of 30% for each floor of an industrial building. Next slide, please. So the intent and purpose of the Urban Corridor Design District is to support attached mixed-use development near the town center and permit larger buildings in the most intensive transportation corridor areas. Approval of this proposed Turnpike Commerce Park through staff analysis would enable industrial flex space that would support job creation near the intersection of 2 major transportation corridors. And through this, staff does find that the proposed Turnpike Commerce Park, including the requested deviations, does fulfill the purpose and intent of the design district. Slide. So going through the Appearance Review Board, this proposal, as I mentioned, was brought to the Appearance Review Board in March. And through that, there were 2 specific recommendations that were brought, or 2 recommendations that are being brought before you. Number one is that the elevations should be revised to incorporate 30% fenestration, which is the minimum, as I mentioned, for all portions of the proposed buildings that are to be visible from the public right-of-way. A little bit of context for that, the original proposal that was brought before them did have those end caps facing the right-of-way at about 8% fenestration. So a requirement by the ARB was to knock that up to 30% from any of those buildings that could be visible from the right-of-way. And that is how we ended up with the revised revisions you see in the two different elevations. The second was a recommendation that the building floor plate, a maximum of 32,000 square feet, be maintained. Based on the meeting, this was not a hard and fast condition, but was passed on as a recommendation for your consideration as the Planning and Zoning Board. As was mentioned, the proposal still does show 40,040 square feet per building. Next slide, please. And as mentioned, staff does find the proposed Turnpike Commerce Park substantially compliant with the town's land development code and the intent and purpose of the design district, and do recommend approval. That concludes staff's presentation. We do have the applicant group here who has their own presentation to give, but until then, staff is available for any questions you may have. Thank you. They have their own, but if you had any questions for staff, I'm good. Thank you.
All right. Evening, everybody. My name is Drew Thigpen. I'm with Greenberg Gibbons Properties. Appreciate y'all taking some time to allow us to talk with y'all tonight about the Turnpike Commerce Project that we're so excited about. All right. So I always think it helps knowing who you're talking to. Greenberg Gibbons Properties is a purpose-built shallow bay light industrial development company that was born in 2021 when a pair of college roommates decided to forego their orange t-shirts in exchange for some navy blazers. We quickly found a couple of gray hairs to lend us a little bit of credibility, and voila, we have a partnership that has been focused exclusively on the development of this specific product type since 2021. This would be, we're hoping, our first project in the greater Orlando area. But since 2021, we have delivered 8 projects throughout the Carolinas, 1 in Greenville, South Carolina, 4 in Charlotte, North Carolina, and 3 in Raleigh. We also have 2 additional in greater Orlando that we're working on, but we prioritized Oakland and this site as our first project to deliver into the greater Orlando area. A couple of highlights of what we're trying to achieve here. So first and foremost, rough cost estimate, we anticipate it'll take us $34 million to deliver this project in its entirety. We estimate, based on the rental rates that we will achieve and the resulting tax associated with those tenants, that this will generate upwards of $800,000 annually in new tax revenue. A third point that we started to highlight as we're seeing it become more and more of a focus with towns is we're committed to delivering this in a single phase. I think we've all had that experience of an exciting project being announced, and all of a sudden it's 5-10 years of orange construction fencing and loose dirt and dump trucks. And That's either because the developer decided to phase it or because there were issues with financing. We're committed to delivering this in a single phase. It would be right at 12 months from start to finish. And we've already secured the financing for the entirety of the project. So no concerns about having to pause midway through because we're trying to cobble together loans or additional equity. And then the last item to highlight is that this specific product type, this shallow bay product type that we'll explain a little bit further, is a high job creator that will create jobs that currently almost certainly don't exist here in Oakland. And so it would be filling a bit of a gap in a town that, you know, that commercial engine doesn't really locate here within Oakland. And we want to provide space for those jobs, for those businesses to be here in Oakland. So this product type, what is it? The easiest explanation is that this product type is for groups that need the hybrid of office and warehouse. So if you need just office, we're not for you. If you need just warehouse, we're not for you. An example is a cabinet supplier, an installer. They need, because they're going to have oftentimes their clients, their customers come to the space. They're going to need something from the front, as you can see on this picture, that resembles single-story office. It's got large 8-foot bay windows. It's heavily landscaped for industrial product. It's something that their customers would feel comfortable entering into. And in the front of these projects, they will have office space where they probably have a showroom. They probably have some sales offices, some accountants, some admin, all of those office support roles. Those go in the front of the building, but they also have to have within that same space the warehouse, because at the end of the day, they are selling that service. And so they need to have a space for their product, for all the cabinets, for all the hardware, for all the pulls that their installers then pick up and bring out in the community to install that product. So that's a perfect example of what our product caters to, those types of service-based tenants that are currently incredibly undersupplied throughout Oakland. And it is consistent with the commercial area that's planned for this site. This slide tries to answer the age-old question that we always get of, who are you going to lease this to? And unfortunately, the honest answer right now is we have no idea. So we build speculatively, meaning we have no idea who we're going to lease to. We build in advance of having any tenants signed. What we do is we identify sites and markets that have the demographics that we believe support this product type, and then we build a product that is the most flexible and utilitarian for as large of a net of tenants as possible. And then when the project is delivered, we lease to the tenants that at that time need space. And you'll see here that that creates a incredibly diverse rent roll. We're not the type of product that is focusing on one specific sector and becomes really exposed to, macroeconomic recessionary forces. We are very diverse, which allows this product type to stay well occupied throughout any sort of cycles that may happen economically. Our site, so Taylor went over this, we're straddled right here between Colonial and Turnpike. The site plan was also showed. If you can think about conceptually what this site plan is, it is for identical footprints, and they're oriented in a way that you've basically got two pairs of buildings that are set up back to back with shared loading in between them. That is the most efficient layout from an access and circulation standpoint to our tenants, but also from a yield standpoint for the site and for its layout. Now, on the specific variances, and Taylor mentioned all these, we're going to give a little more information and kind of our justification for these requests. We try whenever we can to present a project to fit within all of the code and ordinance requirements, but invariably, there are some instances where we can't. And so we want to provide an explanation for the variances that we're asking support on. The first one is around that brick screen wall that is specified when you have commercial abutting residential. What we have proposed instead is a 15-foot opaque landscape buffer, so would accomplish the same screening as that physical brick wall, but it's more consistent with the expectation that this entire area is going to expand out into additional commercial growth. It'll allow for more connectivity when that happens, and it is consistent with what was previously approved. So we're essentially asking y'all to support what was already approved for this.
Could we just go back to the previous slide and,
Yeah.
and you could highlight where this, where your
Yeah, good point.
perimeter where you're talking about this?
Yep, so right here, this is the eastern edge. This is what we're talking about.
Okay, thanks.
So the next variance was requested around the parking. As mentioned, current code specifies a wildly high number of parking spots, over 1,500, which, just for a bit of context, a Walmart supercenter typically doesn't get to 1,000 parking spots. I think we've all known and seen that sea of parking. That's not even 1,000 parking spots. We're proposing 216, which our justification is kind of around two things. The first is our analysis internally of that portfolio of projects that we have that all have the same kind of ratio of parking. And never once on any of our projects have we seen anything close to a parking conflict. I'd be hard pressed to find any of our projects fully leased that are even 50% parked. So we've seen that anecdotally at our own projects, but then more objectively is ITE's metric, which they go out, they analyze hundreds, thousands of industrial projects, just like they do for apartment or office. And for each, they come up with that product specific demand criteria. And for industrial, they come up with right at 1 per 1,000 square feet. So that gets you to 162. We're almost exactly 33% more than that at the 216 versus 162. The last three variances, I'm going to be kind of hopping back and forth because they are all sort of interconnected, and we're trying to fit two things together where we're trying to achieve the yield that we need in order to hit the economics that make the project viable, while also trying to address and support the town's concerns around perspective and how this project is going to be received visually. And so all three of these, you're going to hear a similar kind of narrative and explanation because they kind of circle reference back to each other. But the first one is around the building floor plate. As mentioned, current maximum for industrial is 32,000 square feet. Ours are right at 25% more than that at the 40 square foot number that Taylor mentioned. So the reason that we think that's justifiable is a couple of things. So first off, this is the only remaining industrial identified parcel that we could find within the town. So I think it would be prudent to not, sacrifice any available yield in the town's last kind of golden industrial parcel. It's also consistent with the other industrial buildings throughout the town that are also over 32,000 square feet. And then lastly is the fact that because our buildings are oriented north-south, that additional building floor plate is kind of hidden when you think about the perspective. I'll hop back here. So when we think about perspective, we think about primary and secondary axes. So right now, because our long axis is perpendicular to Colonial and to Turnpike, it's going to hide the additional square footage beyond that 32,000 square feet versus if these buildings were parallel to the streets that they were fronting. Well, now all of a sudden you are seeing that large mass that we know is not pleasant. It's unbroken. it would be more of a kind of a negatively visible project versus this orientation hides that additional depth. So it won't be felt the way that it would if it was oriented parallel to the streets that it's running. Which brings me perfectly to the orientation, where we are oriented perpendicular to Colonial. That minimizes, as mentioned, the visual impact of the buildings. It allows us to meet the code's maximum building width provision, which was a variance that the previous proposal needed. And it allows us to provide enough two-stage stormwater detention to meet all of the water quality and Lake Apopka requirements that we know are so critical here in this area. And then lastly, the building fenestrations. So as mentioned, ARB, understandably so, was focused on hitting that 30% fenestration requirement for all areas of these buildings that are going to be visible. And so what we've come up with is a plan to try and satisfy that while also acknowledging the fact that a significant amount of these buildings in this project will never be visible, most obviously and permanently because of the turnpike. So this is a picture of, that circle looking kind of northeasternly back towards our project. This is what you see right now. So you are already driving westbound. And if you were to attempt to turn your head to look at these buildings while going 40 miles an hour, you couldn't even if you wanted to. And so because of that, we came up with this exhibit, which essentially illustrates what we're proposing. So the three southern fronts that, based off of this kind of orientation that we showed that screenshot from, they would have 0 windows. No one will ever be able to see this because of that turnpike sound wall and because of the growth around it. We also have these areas which, so these 3 faces where you can see a portion of these end caps. We have them at 8%, which I'll show an example of what that looks like. And then most importantly, these 2 fronts that are essentially the front door into our project that are visible because of the presence of this stormwater pond, we have beefed them up to hit that 30% requirement. And so just as a visual example, this is what 8% reflects. So this is what this front, and this front would be. And then this beefed up end cap is what the 30% would be. And what you'll see is we took these storefront windows, moved them along this end cap as well, gave it its own kind of front-looking aesthetic, and then also added that second level of windows as well. So this meets the 30% requirement, and this is what we would have along these 2 end caps. And then just as a helpful comparison, so we've mentioned the previous project, how our project and some of our variances compare. So we're maintaining the same landscaping buffer that was previously approved and requesting y'all to support that. We're actually reducing the square footage that was previously proposed and replacing it, self-storage versus shallow bay with a significantly higher job creating product type. We are greatly reducing the visual impact by reorienting the buildings and only having that 130-foot wide width versus the previously approved variance to get all the way to 240 feet wide. So in short, as mentioned, 160,000 square feet of high job creating, service-based shallow bay product. It is consistent with the zoning. We're looking to invest right at 34 million into Oakland, and we think this project will generate from that investment about $800,000 a year in new tax revenue. And I appreciate the time. Happy to answer any questions.
I'm the new guy. I'll go last.
Taking a look at your plan, I just got to ask, is there any expectation that a semi truck is going to deliver in these bays?
They will. So
How do you achieve your turn radius?
yes, it's a good question. So our access can support the turning radiuses for 18 wheelers. We can provide those exhibits to you. The comparison I make for 18 wheelers, because people always ask that question. They see industrial and they think distribution center. There's going to be 18 wheelers bombing in and out of here all the time. That is not how these tenants function. Their 18 wheeler is the guest room for their house. They have to have it because there will be instances where they will get 18 wheelers. There will be instances where the in-laws visit, but for 50 weeks out of the year, it is not occupied in that type of function. So one of our tenants, a cabinet supplier, for example, what happens is they, at some sort of frequency, probably once every 2 weeks, maybe once a month, they will get an 18-wheeler delivery of that intervals amount of product. They will have to be able to receive it, take it off on the forklifts, put those pallets into their space, and then they break down within their space that material, maybe do some light assembly rework, put it into the piles for each person's house, and then their installers who are not driving 18 wheelers, because that's not how we get into neighborhoods.
They're driving box trucks.
Exactly. Box trucks, Sprinter vans, they're the ones who are coming out, and 95% of the trips are those types of vehicles, but they do have to have the ability to support loading.
Could I ask a follow-up question to yours about the 18-wheelers? One of my big concerns, this property, I like this project a lot, but this property has really awkward access with only the exit traveling eastbound on 50. And I'm trying hard to imagine, even if it's only 6 trucks with all of your tenants, 6 trucks a day, 18-wheelers, making a U-turn at Tubb Street. That's not going to work. So there's got to be some kind of accommodation for bigger vehicles exiting this property to head westbound to get to the turnpike, one of the major arteries, and westbound on 50 as well.
Yeah, so
What-
that's, excuse me, a great point. It's something that we analyzed in extreme detail because access and circulation is huge for us. We got asked that question endlessly because, to your point, it is a limited movement intersection. So you can right in, right out, but you can only left in. You cannot left out. And because of that, in our analysis, if you were an 18-wheeler, you would have to go east. You would not U-turn to go west. You would have to go east. I can't think of the street off the top of my head. It's about a mile and a half down. And then you would have to cross over south, and then you'd have to hop on to Turnpike to go west. So you would not have the ability to left out or to immediately U-turn, to your point. But we've gotten comfortable with that.
Well, yeah, but that puts your U-turn at the intersection of 50 and Tubb Street, which is the major residential artery into our town. And that intersection, I don't think will really support 18-wheelers making U-turns. So that means that they're going to travel down northbound on Tubb over to Oakland Avenue, make left turn on Oakland Avenue, go down that artery to try and get back to the turnpike. Seems really awkward. Is there any way y'all can get another approach to that somehow?
My understanding is that that median on Colonial would not, and it's a kind of an impossibility to get it left out. they're not going to allow us to cross over that.
Well, but there could be there could be a right of way. If you think about extending your, your long entryway there, is there any possibility of having a turn to the east off of there, getting a right of way through that property to come out to Fourth Street? And then there's already a light at Fourth Street, and then people could turn
So
westbound.
we would love, and that is the eventual plan, for there to be a blow through that
Mhm.
allows, this whole area to head east and then take a left at that light. Currently, we don't have the ability, we don't own that area and haven't gotten reception from the sellers on putting that in. That is the ultimate plan for this area.
What is that parcel zone next to the east?
It's currently residential. The
It's
long-term
residential.
plan is commercial.
All the way from Colonial down to the Turnpike, that whole width is all residential?
I think,
Yeah, between Tubbs and,
The south portion, the southern portion of that we were referring to for the variance of the wall, that portion is zoned residential, but as you go north, then it becomes commercial.
okay.
What is your expected size of your tenants? Are you looking at like, because in previous work experiences, I've seen that like 6,000 square foot is your optimal size for the tenants that you're looking for. What is your expectation? Is there a plan of like optimization of like, hey, we're gonna put in X, or are you just gonna build the shell and wait for the tenants to come, is what I'm asking.
yeah, it's kind of a hybrid of the two. So we would go down to 6,000 square feet if a 6,000 square feet tenant was interested. Our average, each project varies between about 10 and 12,000 square feet. That's our average across our portfolio. And the way we would lease this up is, you got 4 buildings. We would go in ahead of time and speculatively build out the entirety of one building, probably with 4 10,000 square foot spaces, just to have them ready, immediately available for anyone who needs them. These tenants, we're not leasing to Amazon where they've got a formal real estate department that's looking at their space needs 5-10 years in advance. What we often say is that it's an owner or a GM who gets a call from one of 2 people, his attorney or his accountant. And they're like, hey man, your space is up in 3 months. You got to have somewhere new. And they need that ability to move in quickly. So we will have that with one entire building fully built out. We will then leave the other 3 open to whatever tenants come along, whether it's 6,000, 15,000. We don't see large tenants, so I wouldn't expect, it's possible, but I wouldn't expect to see a full building user. That's not what we're in the building of. We like multi-tenanted. But we could see a building split in 2 and have 2 20s. But it'll ultimately land in that 10 to 12,000 square foot average.
Is there a reason the drive aisles don't circulate around? Does it, for fire, do you not need circulation all the way around the buildings?
So based on the lengths of these buildings and the location, we would have hydrants, I don't know if you can see my mouth, sort of on the southern side. You'd be able to reach the buildings in all directions. They're short enough in length that you don't need that full circulation for access.
And having those dead end corridors where you can't, I mean, I appreciate that they're, the outer the middle 2 buildings have, an island that you can circulate around, but the outer 2 don't have that ability. It's a pretty long dead end corridor, for lack of a better word, in the hotel industry. And, not having the circulation around for a truck that gets, for example, if a transport truck goes the wrong way, it's going to be very difficult to get out of there. Somebody makes a wrong turn, feels like they're kind of trapped. fire, you know, a lot of different reasons other than to maximize the length of the buildings. I get why you did it, but
Mhm.
it feels like there should be, especially on those two end buildings, a wraparound so that you can circle around, that you're not kind of trapped in there.
Yeah, we've done that on some projects. So these would be heavily signed. So there'd be signage, you know, directing people on where to go if they're trucks versus vehicles. So to avoid what you're talking about someone, you know, driving down a dead end and now having to do kind of the Austin Powers multiple turns. We've found that there is not the need. It's sort of a nice to have. But we found that having a single stretch for this long of a building is sufficient.
Where's your garbage? I mean, I gotta imagine that these guys generate a ton of trash. So where are you putting garbage collection for these guys?
Yeah, so we put it.
Yeah, there's two dumpsters at the end.
Yeah, two.
I don't know if you can. Yeah,
Two dumpsters doesn't seem adequate for the amount of space that you're proposing here.
and what typically happens is we'll provide that up front, and then the tenants, if they need more, they can you know, hire additional dumpsters, and they would just be behind the building. So they're blocked from visibility, and they would just sit adjacent to the rear of the buildings.
I think we need a more permanent plan for if there's dumpster expansion, that it is put in proper locations and that. Your reluctance on the openings, I appreciate the pictures that you put in here, but all due respect, when you're standing at the turnpike and you're looking at it and you got this overbrush that will probably clear it out when you do your construction, the buildings are going to be higher than that wall. And so you will see what these buildings look like from the back. And, you know, the elevation, you know, it's in the, there's a requirement for a reason. What's the reluctance of putting additional windows at the top?
Well, a couple of things. So the buildings, and I'd actually have to reference, I don't know the size of this screening wall. Our buildings might be taller than it, but given your proximity to it, if you think of kind of line of sight, there's no way you'd be able to see the buildings from Turnpike. You're 5 feet away from the angle of a pedestrian, you'd
If
be.
you're 5 feet away from the wall, yeah, but if you're on the other side of the turnpike, you will.
From people on the other side of the Turnpike, potentially.
You're
But
going to be taller than the turnpike wall is probably 12 feet. Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So your
Yeah.
buildings are going to be taller than 12 feet.
yeah, we were focusing on the westbound traffic. The reason for it
Who's
is,
going to be standing there on westbound traffic? I mean, let's be honest. It's the turnpike, people are driving, so.
right.
But it's just the appearance from it that these are going to be taller than that wall. And it doesn't seem like a big add to have the additional openings on the walls to meet,
But
to
it-
limit the variances that you get.
Yeah, I mean, it's extremely expensive to put in those windows. And I mean, I guess I don't really know how the code is applied, but just because you can see the top of a building doesn't mean you're seeing its 30% fenestration. So you could have a building that extends above a wall and it might meet the 30% down below. You can't see it at all.
Doesn't matter where you put them. I just think that, you know, to limit the variances, that we should try to get as close to the requirements as possible. And to me, I don't, you know, all due respect, I'm a developer too, I get it, but cost is not a reason to really try to avoid something, get a variance.
We're trying to fit the project within the economics, like you said, that we need. So it's not the driving force, but if we can't get the returns, then the project can't exist, even if we could get it approved.
Windows are driving the returns that much?
Windows are not
Yeah.
inexpensive. Industrial is this is a very premium version of industrial product. And so we already stretch our pro forma to the nth degree. And with now making some of the areas 30%, it's straining
So how tall are the buildings?
So their clear height, which is what is kind of the industry term, is 24 feet. That's from the floor to the lowest portion of the structural system. That's 2 feet. And then there's a parapet. I don't know if it might be in the elevations, but I imagine they're 28 at their highest.
We have them at 30 feet on the
30
elevations.
feet. 30 feet, yeah.
Is the intention for this to be like a tilt wall construction?
Yes, sir. It is tilt wall. The pictures here, so, well, I think we can do better than that, but one thing to highlight, I'm not sure how familiar you are with tilt, but a lot of people are getting clever with tilt.
I'm very, very familiar.
Okay.
And I'm
perfect.
very familiar with the light industrial space.
Cool.
Yeah, so this is, I mean, quite honestly, I agree with what Mike is saying that like you can't, it's not going to break the budget. He and I are both in construction. He's been at it a lot longer than I have, but I have at least 22 years. So, and I've been in your space before, so I totally understand where you're coming from. I think the overall feeling is that we're we're not asking you to break the budget. We're just asking you to make our town less ugly. So it's I mean, it is industrial. It is a industrial bastion. It's the last one, right? So I think what Mike is trying to say is that it's, I don't know.
Or solid wall as being our defining for driving tests.
Right, you're talking 8 windows.
Yeah.
You know, to break up an elevation that you can see above the wall. I mean, yeah.
Again, respectfully, I don't think you're gonna. We could come up with a line of sight analysis.
So
I don't know how to get the 30% fenestrations above the
Saying
concrete.
30%, get better than zero.
better than 0 is optimal.
Okay.
The other thing is, as soon as you start digging these ponds, all your trees up against that wall, they're going to be gone. So,
But
the tree, tree roots go about, whatever the canopy size is, you can estimate they're probably a little further out than the canopy size. So those trees, I mean, they're going to be gone as soon as you start digging the pond. I've dug a pond myself. I'm not,
There is what, I don't know if you know, Reagan, I think a 30-foot wide FDOT right of way that we can't touch where all those trees and foliage are within. So we're not going to be, impacting anything right up against the wall. FDOT would have heart failure if we were doing that.
it's showing a 12-foot landscape buffer. So just trying to understand.
Okay. So one thing just to go back on the tilt wall, so on the tilt, I just wanted to highlight, you can't really tell. We could show you some better pictures. This is not stamped or stenciled concrete. This is actually brick veneer that is cast into these panels. So it has a really, really, like I said, suburban office feel to it. So I just wanted to highlight that.
They get the dark gray boxes are signage?
Correct.
Yeah, just for signage.
Yep.
My last one, just not to beat the variances to death, but the landscape buffer against the residential. Are we comfortable that that's going to stay residential or go? Because if this becomes a higher end residential parcel, it's basically forcing that developer that they're going to take the onus of building the wall because the landscaping is not going to stay fully landscaped and be the buffer that it is. So just bring that to.
Well, what's happening on the other side, right, is the other development
on the other side of,
on the other side of
South.
4th Street.
yeah, or Fourth, yeah.
Yeah, so there's going to be mixed use on one side, and I don't see a high-end residential. I don't see that parcel staying there. I know that folks don't
Yeah.
want to leave right now, but I just can't see that long-term.
I have nothing else.
So we're not, we go to your fenestration picture with the 20% and 30%, yeah, that one there.
Yeah.
On the zeros, I think we're not asking for you to put windows at ground level. I think we're just asking for maybe I'm speaking for me, I would be happy with just windows above, not like you've got ground level stuff.
Specifically, yeah, but are we referring, we have to be very clear with what we're talking about. So are we talking about on the turnpike side? Okay, we're in agreement. Yeah. Yeah.
Windows on ground level, because nobody's going to go back there, it's cut off. There's no access, but something up high, cutouts in your tilt wall with window would be, I think, pretty easy for us to accept.
So if we were to add in, and I don't know if you can see my cursor, this elevated strip,
On your south facing side, if you guys could manage that, I think that would be a solution for us.
okay, if that's something that y'all would support, we can support that.
Elise, how do we do this? Do we need to go line by line to the variances or?
So first, you need to open it up to the public for public comment.
Yeah.
And then when you bring it back, your motions can be very specific as to what you want. You can go line by line through the variances.
Okay.
Or you can just address the variances that need changed from ARB's recommendation.
Let's this.
Chair, if you can speak into the mic just so we can catch it on the record. Yeah, especially this part.
Okay. Variance number one. Let's. Okay.
Okay, y'all need to turn on your mics, please.
Sorry. Ed brought up a good point, so I'm good with it.
Yeah, I'm good with it too, because
Okay.
especially if they get the cut through eventually down the line, and they're getting semi trucks going through there, no one from a high-end residential is going to want the semis whizzing past their windows.
No.
Yeah, I'm okay with that too.
Variance number two, parking. Yeah. Neither do I.
No issue for me.
Okay.
Rather less.
Building floor plate.
My only issue is on the two outer buildings and not having the turnaround. I think it's a bigger deal. I get their position, but I think it's important.
I think both of those both the trash issue and the wraparound issue are going to be handled by Orange County. Because Orange County is going to require them to basically provide us trash containers, and it's going to have to be fully screened with a drain in it. For Orange County's regulation, so.
I can just touch on that point too. The concept, essentially, we're reviewing a preliminary site plan through this process. As it moves, if this were to move forward to receive final approval, this would essentially be the foundation, the template that would still need to go through a final engineering review, which, as you mentioned, would need to obtain approval from the county in regard to fire safety, circulation, access standards. So all of those elements, like you mentioned, in addition to solid waste, would need to be addressed once it reaches
Okay.
the final review stage.
They're gonna look at the proposed tenant layout, and then they're gonna require them to.
This is something we just don't touch that.
So I guess we're good.
Yeah, I'll let them solve it, so. And then number 4, building orientation. Don't either.
No issue for me.
All right, building fenestration. This is the one where we want to be very specific in adding fenestration to the second level of the
On the south,
turnpike.
on the south ends of the
Yeah,
building.
the turnpike elevation, so.
Can I just clarify that real quick? Which buildings? Are you saying all buildings?
Or
Be all-
Okay.
The 4 buildings. Okay, I'd like to open it up for public forum, please. Please, when you get up there, state your name, your address.
All right, my name's John Gill, 19 West Sadler. I'm also a member of the ARB. Just the one thing I really want to clear up is when we made the motion for the fenestration particularly, that we wanted 30% on all end caps, north and south. Now, with the wall, just having that, I like the way you guys just wanted at the top, that's fine, that's cool. But all 4 north end caps are all visible. Like on this picture, all this bush here in the front, that's gone, it's clear. So all 4 end caps are going to be visible. So when we made the motion, we wanted 30% fenestration on all end caps. Just wanted to bring that up because somehow visible got into the verbiage. That's a long story, but like y'all to really consider the 30%, at least on the north.
It makes a good point. This bush is gone as I drive by it now.
Yeah, I was trying to think where the bushes actually went back to, because I know.
Yeah, there's been a lot of clearing down
Yeah.
here all of a sudden for whatever reason.
It's because of the home.
Yeah, was that one?
Mhm.
It is visible.
Now they're behind my neighborhood.
Gentlemen, ladies. My name is Don Huber, 522 West Second Avenue in Windermere. I'm the property owner. Two things I wanted to bring up. One was the concern about the truck traffic and how there might be a U-turn. And we had that concern even with the storage facility we were proposing. We came up with the consensus from the town and us that we would go ahead and dedicate the road coming in with the intent that whenever the people came in to the east of us for whatever they were going to do, that there would be a road behind their southern portion and we would tie it in. You would be able to get out to Tubbs so you would have access to the light. That was the whole reason we gave the right of way. Even if you look at the house or look at the property directly to the east along the turnpike, it's anything they do out there, if they plant trees, it's just it's terrible the way it looks. I can't, I've had discussions with the landowner myself and to no avail, but anything they do, I think is going to help the looks of what goes on. And I kind of was a little bit shocked myself when I noticed the trees had been taken down along Highway 50 in the last couple of weeks. We were discussing that coming over, how they got through Orange County with that. That's an interesting conversation. But I really think that they have designed a superior product. I think, and I agree with you on the windows at the top of the buildings along the turnpike side. And I just hope that everyone here will support what they're recommending. Thank you.
Thank you. So do we want to revisit the variance number?
Mr. Chair, at this time, if you could call for final public comment, none, close the public hearing.
Does anyone else want to speak? Okay, we'll close public forum. Welcome. A little rusty. We haven't had one of these in a while. Okay, let's revisit variance number 5, the second level fenestration. Thoughts?
He brings up a great point. So, I mean, I think, we've been trying to beautify although I have no opposition to this project. I really don't. I think it looks great. I think you guys have done a great job. But I do think that I just think that the solid concrete walls is not the intent of what we want. That's why we have the rule in wherever it's at in the code or wherever, and I think we should stick to it. And so if it was part of ARB, that their wish was to have 30% on that, we should support that requirement and keep that in, that it'd be 30% on the north side, and that we just have the clear story on the south side.
Okay, so I'm gonna rewind. We're okay with not having fenestration on the rear if we have it on the front,
Stick to the
north and south,
top.
just the
on
top,
south
In the
side.
south,
on the south side.
and fully on the front.
Okay, got it.
I mean, it's on.
I'm just having to write this down because I'm gonna have to put a motion together, so.
They've got 30% on the two buildings as it is.
Correct.
North side, 30% on the other.
Okay.
Well, especially with the bushes and the trees being gone now too, because if two of them have the 30% and the other two have less than that, when you drive by, it's gonna look.
Good with the square foot,
Right.
giving them the added square footage for the
Mhm.
building. So I think it's a good compromise.
I agree. Do we have anyone?
Want to tackle this?
No, we can let's go variance by variance. I think that's the easiest way. Is that okay?
Are you good with that, Garrett?
Okay.
Motions? Start? We start with them?
Do we have a motion for variance number 1?
Yes, I make a motion that we accept variance number 1, landscape buffering as requested.
Second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Make a motion for variance number 2 for parking that we accept as proposed.
Can I have a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Number 3, building floor plate.
Motion to accept building floor plate, 40,000 square feet, 40,040 square feet as proposed. Be accepted.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion for variance 4 building orientation that be accepted as proposed.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
It's a little more difficult.
Okay.
All right.
So
Since I'll take this one. So for variance number 5, building fenestration, make a motion that we require the developer to have 30% fenestration on the north side of the buildings facing 50 Colonial. And on the south side, they include the the upper story clear windows as shown on architectural rendering number 2 on all 4 buildings facing the turnpike.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Right, motion passes. That's it.
Need to do anything more?
Good. Okay. All right. If that's it, we're officially adjourned. Thank you. Sorry. So sorry.
That's it.
Sorry. That's it for that one. Sorry. I forgot about you, Elise. I'm sorry.
D.
Forgot about self.
Thanks, guys. Luck.
Thank you.
Everybody who's remaining, we're going to be talking about cell phone towers. As soon as it's ready, we'll get going. So we have a telecommunication tower ordinance just to fix up our current ordinance a little bit. So let me walk you through that. We had been approached previously by a couple companies that were interested in putting additional cell towers into town. And so we wanted to kind of control the narrative just a little bit. So ordinance 2026 would update our current code to align. There's additional technology needs, as we all know. If you've ever been in town center and tried to get cell phone service, it's horrible. With more people on the networks and trying to compete for that, it's become an issue, and people working from their home constantly complain that we don't have enough of a signal. In addition to that, public safety. So, sorry.
I'm so sorry. Can I get a point of clarification from the board on the previous motions?
Sure.
I'm so sorry, gentlemen. The previous motions, those were all to recommend approval of the project to the town commission with subject to those variance approvals, correct?
Subject to those variance requirements.
That was
Yes.
that can just be reflected.
That's what Kathy was asking.
Taylor, we were just discussing the way in which the motions were made. The way I understood it, time was that the board was approving the individual variances in the course of recommending the overall project itself to the town commission. If we need to go back and reopen it just for them to make that clarification, we can. But we did have the other project requirements that needed to be recommended to.
Right, so theoretically, you're saying it's an overall approval of the project with the conditions?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Subject to the variance approvals previously, but
Yes.
just so we can forward that on.
Yes.
Very good. Well, I know our applicants left. I don't think they'll mind us just clarifying that for the record. So if someone wants to make that. Yeah, if we can reopen that agenda item, just to clarify for the record that final motion.
So does he need to reopen it, or we just go ahead and?
Nope, you guys already went through it. I think it's just clarifying that you all are recommending approval. Town commission to approve the project subject to the variance approvals that were made here.
Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the project with the noted variance requirements for approval?
Sure. So I make a motion that we approve the project as presented, subject to the individual variances and their associated motions that we passed earlier.
All in favor?
Aye.
I believe that was the intent of the motions you guys previously. I mean, it's just clear.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for keeping us out of trouble.
Okay, moving on. So the ordinance will amend our land development code. It would provide limited and controlled opportunities to locate towers on town-owned land. I'll go into some of the restrictions that would still apply, which gives us a little more oversight and control over those towers. And then part of that is for safety and security. So to allow additional signal to reach public safety folks, so that we don't have them, in town center not being able to get a clear signal. Currently, what our code says is that towers are restricted to industrial zone and require special exception approval under current land development codes. So that's why you see them right now. We have two. There's only one active one over by ABC Bus. As you just heard from our previous applicant, that there's limited industrial properties left. So that's why now we're looking at making a little change to the code. The code currently limits tower heights to 100 feet and requires a minimum 2-mile distance comparison, not restriction, but comparison between towers. And then current restrictions may hinder adequate wireless coverage. Like I said, limited industrial sites left to site towers on. And then it's just updating the regulation to make it make sense for our current needs. So basically, I just went over all these, public safety importance, flexible siting benefits, and then just amending the code. So this would limit new infrastructure for town-owned R1A properties only. So what this would do is say town-owned R1A properties would be eligible through special exception to apply for a cell tower. The increase in tower height would be to bring it up to industry standards. So currently what we're hearing from the industry is 150 feet is typical. You would still have to meet, right now the code says you have to be 2 times the height from residential. So that would still apply here. So instead of being 200 feet from residential, it would be 300 feet from residential. We would actually mandate through this code change that the minimum separation would be decreased from 2 miles to 1.5 miles. So that would no longer be something you'd have to call out. It would actually be a restriction to the code. And that would limit pretty much additional cell towers from coming into town unless they can meet that requirement. So right now, the site that we're looking at is behind the police department. There's a lift station back there. It would be in that area. That's the site we're actually looking at. And it's 1.8 miles from the ABC site. It's not in the code, but it would be in our RFP to only use monopole tower designs, no trees, no ones with guy wires and those kind of things. So it would only be limited to monopoles. So again, the public safety benefit, public safety and enhancements, centralizing tower development on town-owned property, efficient land use, reducing visual impact in neighborhoods. It would allow for potential revenue opportunities. Now, what that looks like, and I know this could be a question, we don't know exactly how much that would be normally. How that works is that the company pays you for use of the land, so like a land lease, and then they pay you per company that is up on the pole, right? And normally they only go up to 4. So they pay you a percentage for the first one that goes up, a higher percentage for the second one, so on and so forth to get to 4. In addition, we would ask them in the RFP, we would tell them in the RFP that we would want to have public safety equipment potentially up on there for the safety and security of the town. So it would allow us to have additional safety equipment up on the tower as well to get a better signal. So the Planning and Zoning Board reviews land use and policy aspects and provides a recommendation to the Town Commission for final decision. As I said, this will not be the last. If we were to come through and say we actually want this specific site to go through this process before we go out for the RFP, or in conjunction with the RFP, we'd have to bring it back through the special exception process, which would mean we would have to notify all the neighbors, surrounding neighbors. It would be a public hearing process. So neighbors would have another opportunity to come input on the site itself. So that's basically it. Next steps would be a first public hearing for the ordinance and with town commission on April 28th, and the second one and final one on May 12th. And we're recommending, obviously, approval of the ordinance, and for you guys to transmit a favorable recommendation to the town commission. And if you have any questions, I can try to answer those. Yes, Ed. This is all right. I mean, we have other R1D properties, but with the proximity to residential, this is the only one we're looking at this time. Well, okay, so if we were to do another one, it would be out on the west side of town, which would be too close to the current ones in the industrial areas. So that's why to me, this is kind of one and done. Mm-hmm.
Could we use the water tower as a cell phone tower?
Yeah, have you seen that when they do that?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, it's a little ugly. We're not,
It is ugly.
And that's too close to residential as well.
Okay, I thought that was enough of a buffer. I guess not.
Yeah.
Look, as a frustrated cell phone user in the town, anything we are trying to do to improve, it's one of the biggest things that comes. It seems like everybody that newly moves into Oakland Park, that's the first thing they say is
100%. Yeah.
So
I'm shocked to hear that.
it's great that the town is taking a proactive approach to trying to make life easier, especially our dependence on those little devices nowadays. Two of them.
So do I.
So lucky.
Yeah.
Don't anymore. I'm really lucky.
Yeah. Unchained. Is there anyone present who would like to speak on this item? Hearing none, seeing none, I'm closing public forum. Go ahead.
Favor. I think it's a great idea. We should have. So I share my.
Garrett, how would you suggest that?
Yeah, perhaps you can point out any notes you have here so that the board can make a consensus recommendation.
All right. So in paragraph 14.13.1, purpose and intent, item F, it says strongly encourage shared co-use. I think that we shouldn't be encouraging. I think stating what the requirement is. And the requirement actually is stated in 14.13.7 already. So I think we can just strike that. Strike that. There's also some inconsistency between the terminology that we telecommunications towers versus support structure. I think we should just clean that up.
Okay.
Literally use the same terminology throughout.
I think
These are the kinds of edits that I have.
I think those are perhaps different. They're different terms because they are different structures. I think they.
But they're referring to this. They're all referring to the tower. There's a couple of paragraphs in here that refer to the antenna system having 3 wires for antenna system on the tower. So I mean, it's really nitpicky.
And you're saying to get rid of the term for the prior object you described and just call it a telecommunications tower?
When it refers to tower, call it a tower, not and when it's an antenna, let's call it an antenna and not something else.
I can look at it. I think the telecommunication tower statute, Florida statutes, differentiates between those two
They're different, yes. They're different.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying. Get uniform.
What's the subparagraph
Um,
number?
so, 413.1G talks about the proliferation of unnecessary antenna support structure. What we're really talking about there is telecommunications tower. Because we're not, I don't think we're restricting what's hung on the tower. I think we're talking placement now, where it's going to be.
Okay, yeah, that is, if that's something you want, in making the motion to recommend approval to, the town commission, if you want staff to further refine that language for clarity, we can.
Yeah. I mean, that would be my motion to further clarify, through these paragraphs, the difference between, telecom tower.
You specifically antenna support structures is what you're saying? Yeah.
There's some other 13.3 accessory equipment code. Item F says shall be material and or color which match the exterior of the existing structure. Well, it doesn't say what existing structure. It's got to be the same as. So that should be. And then if we look at 413.7 co-location, to encourage a reduction in the number of antenna support that may be required to meet the town's increasing demand. The telecom towers and accessory buildings shall be structurally designed to accommodate up to 3 providers. I mean, it's all English stuff. 413.9, no advertising on towers. That's the same item as paragraph 4.1.3.4.b. That's the same thing. So same thing stated twice.
Sure, I'll go through and look at it again to make sure that it's not referencing two separate items, and then if it is referencing the same item, we'll go ahead and make those clarifications.
Do any other members have questions or comments? Can I have a motion?
I make a motion that we recommend acceptance to these changes to this document, whatever the proper name is. The ordinance 2026-1.
01.
Okay.
And recommend approval to the town commission.
Yes, I recommend acceptance of the changes to this.
Okay, does anyone want a second?
Sure, I am trying to approve her.
So we are trying to approve ordinance number 2026-1, the change to the telecommunications tower portion of the town ordinance.
Or are we approving the motion for that or the motion for the changes to the changes?
If I may, Chair, it's just I believe the appropriate motion based on the discussion would be to recommend approval of ordinance 2026-01 to the town commission, subject to the modifications discussed by the board. Okay. If the member wants to amend the motion to that, then I think that satisfies all the questions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let me amend the motion that we propose that the town commission, we recommend to the town commission that these changes be accepted into the town ordinances, subject to some clarification of language
That was discussed here. Yep.
that was discussed at the meeting tonight.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Who seconded that? Okay.
This meeting is officially adjourned. Thank you very much.
Gonna go through?